Hey, this is Jürgen Rasmussen. Welcome to the Provocative Hypnosis vlog. Let's have a talk about how you can ruin your clients' lives as a therapist. There are many well-established ways of doing so, but here's one way of doing it that has a really solid track record. So here's how you may do it. So the client comes into your office, they present with psychological suffering, chronic pain, psychosomatic issues, addictions, something like that. Now, what you want to do then is you want to imply that their symptoms mean that they have likely experienced childhood trauma or been sexually abused. Now, if the client says, no, I never have been sexually abused, by all means don't drop it. This is the time to present the idea that, the fact that you don't remember it really just means that you have repressed it. It was just too traumatic and too overwhelming at the time. So your mind split off and repressed it in such a way that not only do you not remember it, you have no conscious access to it to the point where you don't even suspect that something like that has taken place. So the more you don't remember it, the more that likely means that you've been really severely traumatized. And if you're a psychologist, social worker, or even a hypnotherapist, if you know how to present a good frame and the client believes in your authority, they might very well buy that premise. Now, the next premise to then sell them is the notion that, of course, you have to sell them this mental illness frame as well, that their particular experiences is an illness and that they need to be treated, right? So you have to talk about being healed or being cured. And the only way now that the client can be healed or cured is by lifting the repression, by uncovering these memories that are lurking in the client's unconscious mind and poisoning their lives and is the cause of all of their distress. So this now has to be remembered and consciously worked through. So at this time, you may put your client into a group where they might spend a lot of time with other survivors who have either recovered memories or are about to do so, where they can cheer each other on and hear each other's stories and get socially validated every time they interpret something or begin to remember something. You might have them begin to draw, to do imagination exercises, art therapy, trusting their intuition, coddling their inner child, do somatic work, do hypnosis, where you can suggest that these things must have happened. So let's say they remember some sort of memory and they say that a child is hugging them, for example. You might then ask, well, are you sure that it wasn't a small adult? Or if they remember their father touching them or hugging them, for example, you might suggest that, and can you feel how he's touching you in a way that he shouldn't? And really offer the suggestions and do this again and again and again and again and again over time. And every time they begin to remember something, now they might have instantaneous, spontaneous uncoverings, or they may have small fragments appearing over time. Make sure to encourage it and make sure to verify that it's real. Make sure to avoid any reality testing. Make sure to present the idea that their body keeps the score and that their feelings tell them that what's ultimately true. And especially if they have intense feelings and can tell a coherent story, you then have to equate that as it somehow meaning that it has to be factually accurate. Now, of course, any nightmare that they may experience at night, even if the content is far removed, you have to then help them interpret as if it's the unconscious is leaking through repressed memories. Um, any body pain, any any somatic experience is of course just the body then trying to communicate these horrible memories. And here you can also sell the idea that the body keeps the score and the body remembers. And use suggestion, to imply that a particular, finger or foot or body part can communicate with voluntary unconscious movements. Sell that as the unconscious speaking, the whole and only pure unfiltered truth, right? And then make sure to coach the person so that what comes through uh, just confirms the narrative. And if the movements from the unconscious are involuntary or experienced as involuntary, make sure to sell that as the notion that now the body or the deeper wisdom or the unconscious mind has spoken. Now, also, what's perfect about this is that very often just more and more memories might begin to appear. So you have a long-term client. Now, the brilliance of this strategy, of course, is that if the client doesn't recover any memories, they're screwed. They can't heal, especially if they accepted the premise by default. They're destined to keep suffering. Now, of course, the person who begins to discover and believe in these traumatic memories as factually accurate is likely going to suffer a lot with that as well. And since most people around them might not understand or be indoctrinated that much into that mindset, they're likely to spend more and more time with fellow survivors, the only people who can really understand them. And these other survivors are of course also suffering and miserable for the most part. So now your identity, begins to revolve around these other survivors, and you get a lot of significance by being the trauma victim. Now, of course, this is also a very seductive thing because the client now has an alibi. If their life hasn't quite turned out the way they wanted to, it's very seductive now to be able to track all of this back to memories of sexual abuse and trauma, and to be able to say that, look, my life, my relationships, my accomplishments, my levels of happiness could have been great hadn't it been for this thing that happened to me back in the day. Right now, if you're a feminist and you're highly into that ideology too, it really strengthens your identity that you live in a patriarchy, and that men are essentially oppressing you, and not only is it the structures of society that are holding you down, but it's these horrible repressed memories as well. Now, of course, you are as a therapist then you want to encourage your client to interpret everyone who challenged their narrative as being gaslighting narcissists. That makes sure, that contributes to them spending time with only people who are indoctrinated into the ideology. All right. So in this way, you may tear former friendships apart. You may tear families apart. And or you might also really encourage confrontation that they now confront their grandfather, father, brother, uncle, cousin, whatever it might be, and that the only way the relationship can is, of course, if this, in all likelihood, innocent person confesses to crimes they haven't committed, and then the family, has to kind of take sides. Of course, if you're really lucky as a therapist, criminal prosecution may take place. And if you're really damn lucky and you have the right credentials, you can then, as a therapist in court in some countries, experience that your testimony about the affect behind the memories and the coherent story contributes to the verdict of in all likelihood, innocent person. So that's a great recipe. Now, some of you might think that, hey, Jurgen, you're off your rocker. This is like a bad movie script. Not so. This was the whole recovered therapy movement was the greatest scandal in psychology in the late 80s until about the mid to late 90s. According to the science writer Mark Pendergrast, who's written several excellent books on the topic. The Most Hated Man in America, Memory Warp, The Repressed Memory Epidemic. I recommend all of them. According to him, several 100,000 people in the United States alone recovered memories in therapy, memories they had no access to before the memories, during the heyday of this movement. This didn't only happen in the US, it happens in Australia, the UK, a lot of cases in Scandinavia, many scandals. And many of the leaders, that industry was largely shut down around 1997. Dissociative disorder units in prestigious hospitals were shut down. The whole multiple personality disorder movement, the MPD movement and the recovered memory movement were shut down around 1997 due to large multi-million-dollar settlements, to a large degree led by the lawyer psychologist Christopher Barton, who led a team of multi-discipline experts. But many of the leaders in that field are today's traumatologists. They spearhead the DID, or dissociative disorder, dissociative identity disorder movements, and the PTSD movements. So buyer be aware. And many of these ideas are still rampant in our culture. Watch popular shows such as Law and Order, or go to Netflix and watch The Keepers or The Sinner, and you'll see these ideas presented as if they're factual, even though there's no scientific evidence whatsoever that memory actually works that way. Christopher Barton spent many years hunting down these recovered memory therapists, trying to speak to their clients, trying to get a single case corroborated by external evidence, failed to find a single case. Just like if you look at people like Gordon Hammond, who was a past president of a major hypnosis organization, a leading psychologist. Gordon Hammond was one of the main guys to spread this whole satanic ritual abuse craze nonsense. Thousands of people remembered being part of satanic ritual abuse rituals where babies were killed and raped, and the most horrible things happened. People were slaughtered and killed ritualistically. Now, the FBI eventually did a major investigation and failed to confirm a single case. Now, it saddens me to see many therapists, many in the hypnosis world, still promoting these sorts of views or taking a relativistic stance towards them. Because here's the problem. Even if you think that you're a non-leading therapist and you don't necessarily imply this stuff, the client may have accepted this framework, come into your office, you do regression work, and they discover these things. They act out the role in accordance of the client, in accordance with how they expect therapy to work. So anyways, that's one very field-tested, reliable way as a therapist to do your best to help screw up a client's life. All right, till next time.